welcome to SophieCo. I'm Sophie Shepard-Natte. Today, we're looking at what's going on in the Arab world, including Egypt, where the president has just been forced out of power.
The Egyptian revolution cycle has moved on and turned on itself. Morsi is out, forced from power by a popular coup as the people and the army celebrate unity. Political Islam's Egyptian presidency lies in ruins, drowned by the voices on Tahrir. Have the Arab Spring's waves broken on Egypt? What will be exposed if they roll back across the Arab world? Were the Arab Spring's demands coerced? What chances do multi-faith societies have under political Islam? We speak to a woman of Arabia, a princess of the East.
Our guest today is Her Royal Highness Saudi Princess Basmah Bint Saud, activist, writer and a businesswoman, and she joins us live from London. Your Royal Highness, it's great to have you on our show today.
Thank you, Sophie. It's nice to be on your show and on the Russian TV for the first time.
So we start from the latest news. We're witnessing a coup in Egypt where military have taken power, but half of the population, and that's millions, are celebrating. Is this really a military coup or the victory of the people?
No, I think it's actually both. And the victory of the people is the victory of the army itself. Because maybe it's very foreign to other people to know that the army in Egypt has for so long protected the people, and it has been sworn on protecting the people rather than the government. So it's not actually something unusual for the army to abide by the people's law. And since Morsi has been in power by a democratic election, the army has fought very hard to be independent, and Mr. Morsi has fought very hard to have the army under his power. So I think it's just a very normal reaction from the army to be where he is, and definitely celebrating that the army certified his identity and kept away from the political game.
And what about the Muslim Brotherhood? I mean, it's a very well-organized political machine, well-entrenched in the region with millions of supporters. How do you think they will react to the coup and the overthrowing of their man?
Well, actually, Sophie, I have to remind you, and I have to remind everybody, that the Muslim Brotherhood, until 10 years ago, was considered a terrorist party. And it hasn't been recognized by the Islamic community in Egypt or in the Arab world, except recently. So we're not actually as if we're talking about a very great party that has been in power for such a long time. It's been considered as a terrorist party for a long time, since Abdel Nasser. So what I'm saying is that the Muslim Brotherhood shouldn't be very surprised about their short power, being in power, because they are not supported by the Egyptians themselves since a long time. It's not a short notice alarm to the Egyptian people. It is to the world, because the world doesn't know the Egyptian culture, doesn't know the Egyptian history, doesn't know the Muslim Brotherhood's history. So rather than really celebrating the Muslim Brotherhood failure, I don't think by any means that the Islamic Brotherhood is a political movement. It is rather a religious movement politicized by other powers in the world.
Okay, so but it's not just Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Political Islam in general, we see taking up the vacuum, filling in the vacuum of the overthrown dictators of the Arab Spring states. Why is that?
Tyrants could never be tyrants if they're not backed by big powers. Systems cannot survive on its own in this globalized world. And the fight over the Middle East and its gas and petrol has been going on for the last, let's say, 2 centuries. We're just seeing the results of who wants more right now, rather than actually any other meaning which is superior and divine, which everybody has been singing in the last 2 to 3 years on the Arab Spring. It has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with equality. It has nothing to do with humanity. It has to do who has more power on the ground. You take a tyrant, you put another. Nothing changes. If we don't change the systems themselves, we can never actually change whatever is happening in the Middle East, whether now, in 10 years, or in 20 years. The people will still be rising like in Iraq. Saddam was brought down in the name of democracy. And now, 10 years after the fall of Saddam, what do we see in Iraq? Destruction, wars, bombs, bloodshed, undemocracy, fighting over your day-to-day bread. People are insecure, girls being raped. And this was never happened in the time of Saddam. I'm not saying that Saddam was a good one, but I say, what is the alternative? We are making wars and revolutions, and we're not thinking about the consequences. What is the solution? What can we put instead of Morsi and Mubarak and all these tyrants? Because they're all the same. For me, as a human being, they're all the same. They're all exercising the same power. What I'm saying is, if we don't put a system in place, we are looking for a long-term revolutions in the Middle East that will never quiet down in the country. It will be another Afghanistan. It will be another Iraq. And the next one is Syria. So we're just creating terrorism as we go along down the way in the name of democracy.
So you think this coup that just took place in Egypt could actually spill over in the region?
I think it's one-off, and I think it's not going to be the end in Egypt, and it's going to spill over the whole region, and it's not only the whole region, it's the whole globe that is undergoing a shift in economy. Europe, Spain, Greece, the States, and South America, North America, Brazil. Look at the globe. Look at what's happening. You have to connect things together. You cannot just talk about Egypt without talking about Syria, without talking about Brazil, without talking about Europe. The economy everywhere is driving the revolutions, and this is what nobody have seen. We are naming actually revolutions by religious, Sunni, Shia, but basically it's economic. It's unemployment. It's not giving the proper human rights, the social human rights, security, social security, environmental security, child security, government security, border security. This is all our issues which are very important to day-to-day person, and we're not actually really addressing these issues. We're addressing issues and looking at a very secular way, which is the political way, which is naming religion is the cause of reform or a revolution. It is not. It is economic, and this is what we are seeing right now.
You know, Qatar and Saudi Arabia today expressed no objection to the military coup in Egypt, but they're supportive of hardliners in Syria. I mean, they're pouring huge amount of money and weaponry into a country that's ripped apart by a savage war. Why such dramatic difference in dealing with those states?
Well, I would like to ask that question myself. You know, there is so many contradictions, even the states. I mean, you know, when we look at President Obama's remarks about bringing down of Morsi and saying it's undemocratic, well, you can't say, you know, you can't say anything except it contradicts every single fiber in any human being down in the Middle East. Who should be saying what's democratic and what's not? If I do not exercise democracy in my country, if I do not exercise the thing in my country, how can I ask it from other countries? There's a lot of contradictions on the scene, on the political scene, and everybody is confused and confusing the masses about the messages they're sending from the top P5 security club, or I call it the club.
But would you agree that the two countries, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, are actually competing in exporting of the hardline Islam to the region, and thus, you know, it all comes out to control who will control the region through hardline Islam?
Well, let me tell you something. Actually, Saudi Arabia or Qatar could not do anything on its own. There is support from different parts of the world for these things. As Russia is supporting Syria, Saudi Arabia is against. So it's like a game. It's like a football game. Everybody tends to put the ball in the other person's field or government's field. It's a game of power. And this is blankly, you know, naming it down to the core and distilling every single agenda in the region to the core. It's not about Saudi Arabia. It's not about Qatar. It's about who has more power in the region, and whether it is by Islamic agenda or by democratic agenda or whatever agenda you can put to it. It is a fight for power.
All right. So we're going to take a short break now. Coming up next, what's up for Lebanon and Saudi Arabia? How watertight is it when it comes to revolutions? Stay tuned.
Are us, and us in this case is the U.S., and it spies on just about everyone in the world, including its so-called friends and allies. Washington seeks total global information dominance, and this is being done, we're told, to fight terror. Wouldn't it be better if the U.S. monitored its intelligence community rather than snoop on the rest of us?
Choose your language.
Good morning from me, Kevin Owen.
Choose the news that concerns you. Choose the opinions that invigorate your mind. Choose the stories that impact your life. Choose the access to your RT.
Wealthy British scion Zach
Markets, finance, scandal. Find out what's really happening to the global economy. For a no-holds-barred look at the global financial headlines, tune in to Kaiser Report on RT.
I'm used to the tundra, to freedom and my deer.
In second grade, I ran away from the boarding school with two of my friends. We ran to the tundra.
The tundra is just mosquitoes. I don't know how people can live there. There are no TVs in the tents.
How could I send my child to a boarding school? I wouldn't be able to sleep at night after that. They enter life without knowledge of how to do basic things. They don't get that in school.
The real damage and complexity of this oil spill was not something that you could grasp just by looking at dirty birds.
We have between 4 to 5 million people in this directly affected area of the coast, and it's pretty clear why it's not being reported, because BP can't afford to have it reported.
All along the Gulf Coast are clean, they are safe, and they are open for business.
BP is the single largest oil contributor to the Pentagon. The U.S. war machine is heavily reliant upon BP and their oil.
This is a huge step backwards for democracy. It's a step forward for oligarchy.
Corexit is toxic.
Because it looked a lot like spraying in Vietnam. It was not a picture that either the government or BP really wanted to have out there.
I don't want dispersants to be the Agent Orange of this oil spill.
Готово.
to SophieCo. Now, apart from Egypt, Syria is another very contested issue at the moment, and we talk to Her Royal Highness Princess Basmah Bint Saud. Your Royal Highness, you are a Saudi princess who grew up in Lebanon and is half Syrian. The Syrian conflict must also be a very personal thing for you, no? What's your take on the whole thing?
Definitely. It's I can never distill myself from my origins of my mother's actually background, my family in Syria. I have a big family in Syria that is suffering right now, along with millions of other Syrians. I am here and my heart goes to all the Syrians, including my family, including the refugees I have seen on the borders of Jordan and of Lebanon. And my heart goes out to the governments who are responsible about such horrendous genocides. And I really mean genocides. I've been there, I've seen what is happening over there. Children are being slaughtered down the street when they're crossing the borders.
What do you mean under governments?
I mean all the governments of the world, whoever has a responsibility about this thing, about not either the opposition or the government. Both of them are in the game themselves. And I think both of them, if they have listened to reason before hell broke loose, we wouldn't be seeing 10 million refugees on the borders. It's been a head-on game by both parties, the opposition and the government. And I think we should just sit down a little bit and think about who is benefiting from all this. I'm sure the Syrian people are not benefiting, because I've been there, I've talked to these refugees, I talk to my family on a daily basis. Definitely they're not happy from the situation, and they say on a daily basis that if I can go back to my country, I don't care what happens over there. I don't care who rules, as long as I go back to under my roof. This is the song that I've been hearing from mothers, from wives, from children over the borders, from the head of the tribes on the borders also of Syria and Jordan, and whoever is really transmitting the picture in the media from both sides, from the government or from the opposition, are not seeing what's happening down the street, or they choose not to see it, because it's really a tragedy. It's a human tragedy, more than you ever saw in Afghanistan and in Iraq. It's a mass genocide. That's what I call Syria right now.
For the West, it all comes down to Assad should go. What do you think? Should Assad go?
Well, it's a very hard question to ask on air. I'll tell you something. I'm not with Assad, and I'm not against him, and I'm not with the opposition, and I'm not against them. I'm with the people of Syria. Whatever the Syrians choose to have, should have. We should not be putting our heads and arms inside Syria. Syria should solve its problems on its own, like we should say to every country in the world. Everybody should choose their own country, their own government, their own solutions. Nobody should put his leg or hand inside other people's problems.
But unfortunately, it seems like in case of Syria, they really don't have much say in what happens to them. I mean, about Syrian people.
And that says a lot about both sides. It says a lot about the opposition, and it says a lot about the government. So I wouldn't be choosing either of them actually to be the spokesman of the Syrian people.
And what about Lebanon? When you talk, it's a global thing. What's going to happen in Lebanon? Because people always talk about Lebanon and how beautiful, multi-ethnic it was back in the 70s, and that's also under threat of extinction right now, especially with the Syrian case next door.
Lebanon has been the field for everybody since a long time, for the Palestinians, for the Israelis, for the Syrians. It's the field for every single war. Everybody fights his own battles on the land of Lebanon, the most beautiful country in the world was. And I grew up in Lebanon. I grew up in those beautiful mountains, and those in a society that didn't even know what religious sects are all about, rather than actually being Christian or being a Muslim or being whatever. They live peacefully besides themselves. And when the game started in Lebanon in 1975, and the army has engaged with the Palestinian refugees, it started as an argument and it ended in a civil war. So I think this doesn't happen actually just by accident. It just happens by a very, very articulated plan to take the war further ahead. And that's why the civil war actually stayed in Lebanon for 20 years. And don't ever think the war has ended in Lebanon. It's just a continuous war, but in a different phase and a different face.
How do you regard Saudi society right now? Because I remember you say that it is more backward, for lack of a better word, than it was in the 80s.
Every year that passes, I see things going back more and more backwards until the time of King Abdullah. I'm really impressed by King Abdullah until 2 years ago. His policies, his governance of the society of Saudi Arabia. He took the woman straight ahead. He put her on TV. He has turned his deaf ear into those voices of extremists who were calling to King Abdullah to favor the women and imprison them behind their closed doors. He did not listen. He went along with his agenda that I thought was the core of Islam that people were not used to in Saudi Arabia. He was acting as a Bedouin man who really was taught Islam as its basic form rather than in a university that taught you extremism and how to treat people in a very extremist way.
If it were up to you, what would be the first thing that you would change for women in Saudi Arabia? The very first thing.
Well, the very first thing is just establish a law called recognizing women as a human being. Having put her on that list of law of equal in law, like the Quran, and punishment and rights. This is the first thing I would call for, a rewriting of a constitution, or writing a constitution rather, because we have laws, we don't have a constitution.
You are a very outspoken person. How do the Saudi royals react to that? Aren't you afraid that you may be called back to Saudi Arabia and punished for what you're saying or for what you're fighting for?
I do not. If you go out of Russia and you say something, just as a truth, I'm not fighting Saudi Arabia, and I'm not fighting the law, and I'm not fighting the government, I'm not fighting the king, I'm not fighting anything. I'm calling for reform. That's what I'm calling for. I'm not calling for revolution. I respect my king. I respect my government. I'm for the government. I'm for the very wise men in Saudi Arabia. There is a lot of men and women in my family and in the government that know and exercise what I say. What I'm calling for is reform of the existing system. So there is no actually fear in my heart whatsoever of saying the truth and calling for the truth. And if you go back to Saudi Arabian government, there is a lot of misjudgment about our country. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of misjudgment about the people who come out in the media, because there is so many veiling to what's going on in our societies. Now everything is being unveiled. You can go on Twitter and see what people talk about. And I'm a tweeter, so you would really get to the core of the problem. I'm not afraid of that, because my family are not the monsters people are trying to draw. And I'm a proof of that. I've been writing in my country for 7 years on the same subject that I'm talking about right now. And the king was all for it, and he encouraged me to say my own mind. He was never actually against me, and he never was, and he's not right now. Otherwise, I would have been stopped a long time ago. I'm calling for reform in the executional level, not on the upper level, and everybody knows that.
All right, Your Royal Highness, unfortunately we're out of time, but it was really, really wonderful to speak to you.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you.
That was Her Royal Highness Saudi Princess Basmah Bint Saud, and you're with SophieCo. I will see you next time.